We'll get into some shoring requirements. It's important to remember that Amdeck is a reinforced concrete slab and needs to be treated as such. This means that it is absolutely must be supported properly. Although we provide design guides that tell what reinforcement is needed for various configurations, the final design for the reinforcement must be approved and stamped by an engineer. The same engineer will also provide information about the shoring details you need. For shorter spans, there isn't much difference between the Pro and Eco versions in terms of the wood metal joists and would come down to the shoring spacing requirements. Amdeck Eco would need to follow typical spacing of 4 feet, while Amdeck Pro can be supported roughly every 15 feet. This spacing can change based on what the structural engineer determines. For some longer spans, the wood joists might need to be done in 2 sections, since lumber is usually maxed out at 16 feet in length, while the steel channels can come in much longer lengths. In a situation like this, the inside ends of the wood joist would have nothing to sit on. This is where the wood screws with washers come into play, as we show in the previous slide. These anchors will get embedded into the concrete and basically allow the wood joists to hang after the flooring has been removed and the concrete is cured. This is especially important for situations like the one you see here. If you're looking to use Amdeck to span, for example, 50 feet, then your Amdeck system would need to be double spanned. Double span Amdeck would require different reinforcement to that of a similar configuration, but only a single span. For an example, the reinforcement of a 24-foot single span and a 20-foot double span would be different. When doing a double span, a structural support in the center is needed, which would typically be either a steel beam or a concrete beam. The steel beam can be under the Amdeck system or inside the floor system. On the screen, you can see an example of a concrete beam. The left image shows the beam flush with the underside of the Amdeck system, while the one on the right protrudes from the bottom. The size and rebar configuration for the beams would be designed by your structural engineer. You would use traditional forming for these beams. So depending on your project, you may have a large opening or a different condition that requires Amdeck to not terminate at the wall, as an edge beam is needed. Again, depending on your architectural or structural needs, the beam can be done either flush or protruding from the bottom. Regardless of the shape of the beam, the forming for it would be typical, something similar to what you see on the screen. Just to emphasize this again, Amvic does provide a design guide for the reinforcement, which needs to be approved by an engineer. Things like shoring and beams would not be part of the design guide, but would be done by the same engineer.